Respected chair of the panel, distinguished luminaries on the dais, off the dais, delegates, friends, countrymen, good morning. Well, I'm clearly the odd man out here. Everybody's talking about space, and somebody here is talking about financial services. But then it's all about money, honey. So I need not preach to the choir here. I'll be preaching to the choir if I say space needs a lot of investments, capital. I mean, it's been debated, discussed, it's set aside. So yeah, I represent the fifth and the newest financial sector regulator in India, which is called IFSCA. So the four other financial sector regulators are, of course, you all know, the Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, which looks after the capital markets, the IRDI, which look after insurance, and PFRDA for the pension funds. Now, all those four regulators look at domestic India. That is their jurisdiction. Now, IFSCA needs a different jurisdiction, which means there is a foreign or an international jurisdiction. If they are taking care of domestic jurisdiction, we have an international jurisdiction here, right? Now, when I say international jurisdiction, it's not something very arcane away from India. It's within India. It's in a place called GIFT City, Gandhinagar, Gujarat. Now, what do we mean by this? The first international financial center, which was set up at GIFT City, is the international jurisdiction. So when capital and talent took flight to offshore locations, the government of India decided to create an offshore within the onshore. And that is this IFSC. And IFSCA is the regulator, the unified regulator for this IFSC. So when we say unified, we are vested with the powers of the Reserve Bank from the banking side, from SEBI for the capital markets, from IRDA for the insurance, pension fund. So that's why we become unified regulator for that IFSC. This competes with New York, the IFSCs in New York, London, Dubai, Singapore, and so on and so forth. So that's the perspective. Now, how does this all gel well into space? Now, when you create an international jurisdiction within India, this is a foreign jurisdiction, which means the rupee convertibility problem is solved there. A foreign space tech coming to India can come to an IFSC and deal with foreign currency. You could deal with dollars, you could deal with pounds, euros, doesn't matter. The rupee challenge is not there. So for a foreign company to come in, it becomes a lot easier. Similarly, the Indian or the domestic space techs who look at foreign markets, who work with other jurisdictions, this becomes an ideal launch pad. Because when we say it's an offshore, please remember, it is very competitive with the Dubais and Singapores of the world. It is zero income tax for 10 years, zero capital gains, zero STT, zero GST, 000. That's how it goes. So it's not about a tax saving, but what I'm looking at is the savings can be plowed back into the R&D again, because that is also very much required for this sector. So that's how this concept of IFSC and IFSCA comes in. Now, from a finance angle, when we look at it, we usually see three areas. That's what the experts say. One is the embedded finance, because finance is getting embedded every way through fintech. Second is the sustainable finance. Of course, that is the theme all over. And third is the emerging decentralized finance, Web 3.0. At IFSCA, we are seeing a fourth dimension. We call that spatial finance. Taking the geospatial intelligence today, if we can give a better agricultural loan to a farmer, give a better crop insurance to the same person there, we are talking about financial instruments here. I am talking about lending, I am talking about insurance. Comes under the financial sector regulator, right? Similarly, on the sustainability front, today we are talking about greenwashing. Your geospatial information can help us see whether the money which we are plowing into sustainable endeavors are really helping out on the greenwashing front. Similarly, we are seeing more things coming up. Now, what we have done as IFSCA is, probably for the first time in the world, a financial sector regulator has created a regulatory framework for space techs. We have it already launched. So we have created a framework called FE framework, the FinTech Entity Framework, under which we recognize the FinTechs and the Tech Fins. And the Space Techs are under the Tech Fins, technology with a finance angle, like the way I said, better loans, better insurance, and so on and so forth. So today, Space Techs are recognized and authorized. So as a regulator, we need a regulation, like the way the Reserve Bank of India can give a license to the bank through their Banking Regulation Act, or a SEBI gives a license or the authorization to an exchange. We have now created the regulation to give the authorization to a space tech and recognize it as an entity. Now, what does that mean? That means the entity can set up shop in the IFSC, get the host of benefits. And in addition to that, there's one more thing which we did. For the first time in India, a financial sector regulator is coming out with incentive scheme. These are grants for the entities getting set up under this framework. And the grants are like proof of concept, sandbox, green focus, sustainable focus, and so on and so forth. This is going to be launched by end of this month, so watch that space, as they say. So that's some of the unique things happening where a foreign fintech or a foreign space tech can come over and a domestic space tech can come and collaborate, a platform where it is truly international. So that's how it is coming to. But as financial sector regulators, we are not experts in space. So what we did, we tied up with the best folks. We got into an MOU with the Department of Space, thanks to the efforts of, Mr. Somnath, who had come down, the Space Secretary, ISRO Chairman, when the Prime Minister was there in Gift City last week of July. We had an MOU exchange. So they're going to give us a technical expert. The brain behind it was Mr. Sudhir. He's sitting there smiling at me. Thank you so much for getting that going. But net, what we are looking at it is not just about creating a framework and getting things coming together. We need the investments part. Now, as a financial sector regulator, we can do a lot of things from a capital perspective. We can create regulations for alternate investment funds which focus on space techs. We could create SPACs, they call it the Special Purpose Acquisition Companies. The US 2011 was a record year. They raised a lot of $1 billion. In fact, even Virgin Atlantic took that route in 2019 to raise capital and go. In fact, I dream of having an exchange-traded funds of just space tech companies in future, probably 5 to 7 years, because we need so much of capital. When we're talking about private and all those investments to come in, somewhere it has to be kind of brought into a system. It gets traded, it has a regulator, financial sector regulator, and so on and so forth. The last point which I want to talk about is the future, the way I see it. We have already made sure aircraft leasing is a financial activity. We have made ship leasing as a financial sector activity. Very soon, spacecraft leasing is going to be one. We are going to look at that because the way the space tourism and the way the potential we see, this is not science fiction anymore, right? Tokenization. Everybody's talking about the fractional ownership. How about getting space collectibles, space memorabilia as tokenization? I can put it up on exchange under the financial sector, regulatory powers and get more capital for this. Raise, trade, NFTs, the possibilities are just boundless here. And lastly, just want to remind, last year, we had about 612 billion from the venture capitalists totally, of which probably 3% went to the space sector, about 17, 18 billion. Now, there are a lot of venture capitalists who are interested. They want to see some regulatory guidance, hand-holding. They want to see, brands like ISRO, InSpace, all supporting space techs, and I'm sure they are ready to put in the money to see where it goes. And trust me, this is international jurisdiction, again, as I said. So if a foreign company is going to invest here, most of the Indian rules do not apply because it's international jurisdiction. Only when the money crosses to the Indian border, the FEMA, FDI, all those things come in. But this is like offshore location. So which means if a foreign investment is coming to a company here within the IFSC, it is the IFSCA, the regulator, who has to take the ownership. So that's a very new concept the government of India has brought in. I thought I should bring it here. And before I end, if you look at 10, 15 years back, when we talk about global warming, we talk about climate change, the faces which come are those of scientists and environmentalists. But today, when you talk about those things, central banks, financial sector regulators, financial institutions are very much leading that discussion. Because it is capital intensive. You can have a net zero gain and a goal, but it is going to be capital intensive. What we are doing here today with IFSCA as a financial sector regulator tying hands with Department of Space, we are trying to leapfrog and think ahead that this is the same thing which is going to happen for space. So I think the time for space sector to be at its rightful space and place has come, and I wish all of you the very best and always ready to share in the journey as a financial sector regulator. Thank you so much for the opportunity.